what happened. It seemed like it was working when before the meeting started. So I don't know what could have changed. But again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for bearing with us as we deal with some of these technical and audio issues. But we are here today to discuss moving towards best practices for digital badges. As I said, our agenda today is really to publicize the guideline work that we've been doing to get your feedback on what we've developed and really use our time here to have a brainstorming and discussion session related to those guidelines. So we're really looking forward to you to be active participants in the discussion today through the chat box or by opening up your microphone. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Michael Amagna. I'm a reference librarian with liaison responsibilities for information literacy, English, and distance learning at Delaware County Community College, and I serve as the faculty coordinator for the Library Services Department. I'm currently serving as the convener for the Digital Badges Interest Group, and I'd like to turn it over to our past convener, Cynthia, so she can introduce herself.
Hi, and thank you, Michael. My name is Cynthia Ippoliti. I'm Associate Dean for Research and Learning Services at Oklahoma State University. And as he mentioned, I'm the past convener of the Digital Badges Interest Group. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Emily. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Emily Rimland, and I'm an information literacy librarian at Penn State University. And as you can see there, I'm the incoming convener of the group. And I'm going to pass it back.
Great. So just a little bit about the Digital Badges Interest Group. You know, the Digital Badges Interest Group has a charge to provide a forum for discussion and the exchange of ideas, and looking at ways to use digital badges within libraries and to enhance information literacy instruction. And really that's why we've developed this discussion today is really to open up the forum to really develop solid guidelines that all libraries can use in developing digital badge programs. And so one way that we're going to look to facilitate a discussion beyond today is through the Digital Badges Interest Group's libguide page. As you can see here, we have a libguide page dedicated to this interest group, and you can see it's a pretty easy URL to remember. And while we have some basic information there today, over the upcoming weeks and months we'll be adding additional information, including the guidelines that we have drafted, and provide a forum for an exchange of ideas. So that's a great URL to bookmark in your browsers now. And like I said, we'll be adding new content and enhancing the content over the coming weeks and months. So I want to turn this over to Emily as she gives you some background on our guidelines.
Thanks, Michael. Again, this is Emily, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we came to develop these guidelines so you have some context and information about how we got here. The Digital Badge Interest Group was formed in 2014, and so we've been working on these the guidelines themselves for probably about 6 months now. So the group's been around almost 2 years, and we have a number of people here today. Hopefully all of you are a member within ALA or thinking about becoming a member of the interest group. We also have a listserv that, if you need more information, we can provide that in the chat later about how to get signed up for that listserv. But basically we provide some information about upcoming meetings on that, and also when things are published online, noteworthy news pieces about badges or libraries and badges and micro-credentials via the listserv. So if you're not subscribed to that, we can get you that information. It's also available on the libguide that Michael just mentioned. So what we figured out pretty quickly when we formed the Digital Badge Interest Group through an online meeting such as this one was that a lot of the members in ACRL are looking for guidance about how to get started with the digital badge program. So that shouldn't be a big surprise, and it wasn't to us, but we were looking for ways that we could help other people get started with badge programs. Cynthia, Michael, and I have various programs going at our different institutions. So we have some experience, but there's a lot of people out there that want to do various things, and we wanted to provide some information that would help everybody to get started at the level where they are. Around the same time, ACRL was contacted, the leadership was contacted about sponsoring something called the Lumina Summit on microcredentials, and this happened last fall. And this was a summit that was sponsored by it's a nonprofit group, you may be familiar with them, called Lumina. And they had this summit in Washington, D.C. that was attended by various people from higher education. And I think it was a 2-day event where they got together and kind of had a giant powwow about how to sort of move microcredentials forward. And they've published quite a few documents. You can look and find them on their website. But the ACRL membership at the time attended this summit and got a lot of information. There wasn't really quite so much clear steps moving forward, but they wanted to stay involved and kind of keep on pulse on what is happening with microcredentials. I think it's safe to say that just from my experience working in the area of microcredentials for at least 3 years now, it's kind of moved slower than a lot of people were anticipating. And I think a lot of that has to do with employers being willing to accept digital badges or microcredentials. And so a lot of what the talk at this Lumina Summit, from what I gathered looking at the notes and things, was that Lumina is trying to get employers to look at badges and work with higher education as a way to get them adopted and get it moving a little bit more quickly. So that was kind of an outcome of the summit, and like I said, ACRL ended up sponsoring the summit. So we're maintaining a pulse on that. Around the same time, too, Cynthia authored a document called Keeping Up with Digital Badges, and we can provide the link to this in the chat box later on. I forgot to put this one in there. But that provides a lot of information about the background as it relates to where things were going into the Lumina Summit. So that's something that the Digital Badge Interest Group kind of helped with as well. And when all this was happening, what we decided would be a good course was to create a small ad hoc group to help work on these guidelines that we were hearing from members that were needed. And we did this along with a few members of the VAL committee, which is Value in Academic Libraries Committee. Primarily Deb Malone was part of our group. And we worked together all virtually to create the guidelines that Cynthia is going to discuss here in a couple minutes. But we didn't really want to go too far with them before we had some feedback from the community. The other thing we really tried to stay away from so far is calling them standards, which is why we're going with the words guidelines instead, or best practices is another way to think about them. But generally speaking, the badging community, the overall badging community is really wanting to stay away from standards. They really want to kind of keep it a little more open-ended and don't want to be quite so boxed in by standards at this point. It may change in the future. But that was the primary reason why we didn't want to call them standards. And with this landscape changing so much, we also felt like calling them standards would probably be too prescribed, too kind of premature, actually. So that's kind of why we stayed away from the language of standards and went with guidelines or best practices. So that's a little bit of background on the guidelines and how we came to them. And as Michael said, we're really hoping to get more community feedback, comments, eyes on this document, because it was really a really good experience for this ad hoc group to do. It was something that I've never really done. And it was really kind of challenging to come up with some baseline guidelines about what a digital badge program should have, at least to start with. So I'm going to thank you, Cynthia, for posting a link to that, the Keeping Up With document in the chat box. And I'm going to pass it over to Cynthia now, who's going to take us a little bit more into detail about the guidelines that we've worked on.
Great. Thanks, Emily. I'm going to go ahead and send out the Google Doc link in case you haven't seen it before, and I'm also going to go ahead and pull up the PDF in the main window here, so bear with me for just 1 second. So there's the link if you want to access the Google Doc separately, and I'm going to go ahead and share the PDF of the actual guidelines themselves. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. Please let me know in the chat if you don't. Okay, great. Thanks, Emily. So hopefully that's good. So basically, the first part is just providing background and introduction. Again, why are we doing this? Why do we care about, badges or credentialing in general? And then the first part is really talking a little bit about what is it. And we just again, we kind of kept with very broad sort of definitions because we want to make sure that these guidelines are widely applicable to a wide variety of contexts, whether it's in the classroom or outside of the classroom or in whatever other format, that particular institution or group wants to go ahead and create the program. But basically, the description is that a digital badge is a visual representation of the mastery of a skill or kind of evidence of achievement. And it's talking a little bit about the movement, about how these badges are created and shared, and basically what are they and what can you do with them. And then we've kind of moved into sort of the program development part. If you look on the bottom of the first page where it says alignment with existing standards, we wanted to make sure that whatever program is created can be, sort of merged with, depending, again, on whatever the standards that you're working with. So, for example, if you're working with the new framework for information literacy, you can go ahead and use those. But basically, just making sure that the learning outcomes for the badge program can also be integrated with whatever the content is that you're trying to work with. And then making sure that there's evidence of achievement as well as sort of how is that achievement transferred and given or conferred upon the learner, and then sort of what do they do with that. So that's kind of where that piece came in. Then we move into what we call the design. So defining sort of, again, very broadly, that making sure that each badge is a consistent design, that you clearly identify what the badge is for, as well as, how it's awarded and what additional metadata might be embedded within that particular badge. Because again, it's not just about having an image, it's about what that badge really means and what does it signify that has been achieved, what kind of learning has been achieved, what kind of skill set has been achieved. And we move into openness and connection. So again, these badges can be integrated into learning management systems. Just about, I think, every kind now allows for that. You can also use them more openly through something like Mozilla Backpack, where a student or a learner can log into the system itself and kind of collect everything and keep everything there. And then making sure that the badge has enough metadata, again, to really describe how the learning was achieved. So sometimes a badge is awarded simply for attending something. It's a yes or no kind of a question. Other times, the awarder has to verify that the learner or the person that received the badge has a particular set of skills because they took a quiz or did something else. Or finally, the learner has to upload the evidence that that particular skill set has been met. So for example, if you're going to award a badge for video production, having the actual video itself or link to the video as part of the badge would be something that you want to think about. So kind of keeping in mind how all of these elements integrate with one another. And then finally, kind of the biggest piece, which is sort of sometimes the most difficult to achieve, is this whole idea of gathering support from stakeholders and really defining what the value of the badge is. Because really, in essence, in and of itself, the badge is not that it's meaningless, but you want to make sure that it's integrated into a broader context, whether that's part of an institutional goal or outcome or part of a programmatic level type outcome or set. You want to speak to those kinds of elements. And so thinking about what the benefit of the badge or the program itself is, What does that mean in terms of the mission of your particular library or educational context? Again, knowing where the badge is coming from and how it's being supported with the other stakeholders on campus. And then having enough support from the different entities, either, again, depending on your campus or your program, and making sure that they are on board as well. And then talking about what the context in which the badge was awarded, again, what kind of skill sets, and making sure that there's a connection between the skill set that the learner has achieved with whatever their goal is. So whether it's employers that say, yes, this person has been certified in, let's say, teamwork or communication, and also kind of, or maybe they achieve some additional academic skills or outcomes. And you can see this is a draft document because we still have notes. As you can see on page 3, under value of the badges, under point number 3, I feel like this needs something more. So this is definitely still a work in progress for sure. And then the criteria again for issuing the badges. The awarders have to make sure that they have sort of that the subject matter to be able to expertise to be able to say, yes, I certify that this person has achieved that particular skill set, and that you have sort of the authority to be able to confer that certification upon the learner. And then making sure that the criteria, again, or evidence for earning the badge is really, really clear, either as part of the badge itself or the program page or the metadata or kind of a little bit of everything. Making sure that there are measurable goals and outcomes that are associated with the badge. Again, trying to say, yes, the person gets the badge for attending something might or might not be enough. It really depends on the type of program that you have. And again, the criteria for earning the badge. So kind of that building in that whole assessment piece that is so very critical to awarding the badges themselves. And finally, we talk a little bit about the assessment, which is possibly having scoring rubrics, learning outcomes, and or the actual evidence, the product, the work product itself. And then we had some references that we utilized to help us kind of guide this document. And in essence, that's really it. So I'm going to go ahead and put up the kind of guiding questions for the rest of our time together. So again, the focus is wanting to hear from you what you think about this initial draft. Obviously, we have some additional work to do on it, but kind of getting your initial feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and put the PowerPoint back up. So the discussion questions are meant to be, again, very broad, but we want to kind of hear from you about what you think initially of what you think of this document. Do you think we're missing any kind of big pieces? Do they provide enough detail so that if somebody who's really never looked at this before or has never really thought much about a badging program can kind of pick it up and it will help guide them? How else can we publicize this, or any additional suggestions? I think we can go ahead and use the chat, or if you have a I don't know if anybody has a microphone enabled, but I'm going to go ahead and just open it up now and see what folks think and get the discussion started. Okay, so let me double check on the Google Doc, Kelsey, and hang on while I try to do that. I just sent the actual link, and I did double check on the settings, and anyone with the link should be able to view the Google Doc, so please let me know if you're still having issues, and I'll try to send that to you maybe separately. Okay, great. Perfect.
This is Emily. I just saw Marla's question. We really haven't advertised this outside of this online meeting so far. We really wanted to start with bouncing it off of this group first. So this primarily went to the Digital Badge Interest Group listserv. And maybe Cynthia sent it to a few others. I can't remember. She can chime in. But we really just wanted to start with like our sort of main stakeholders and the people that gave us the original feedback to start with. So if you have thoughts on like sort of who we would go to next to advertise that, like what groups might be interested in seeing this, we're certainly open to that.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Emily said, I only sent this initial document out to the interest group. We didn't want to kind of have, 100 people in on this meeting. We kind of felt that might get the discussion out of hand, and we really wanted to vet it first, run it past this group first, and then we could send out a more finalized draft out for review or other additional feedback later. But that was one of the things maybe we can talk about. Where should we publicize it? How could we? At what stage is it? How much more work on it do we have to do? Those kinds of things. And I'm looking at Diane's question. And as far as I know, I don't know if anyone's compiling that, but maybe our libguide might be a really good place to highlight that, to create that list of examples of academic libraries that have these kinds of programs. What does the group think?
And that was something that the interest group had discussed in the past, is providing examples for academic libraries that are using digital badges, that do comply with our guidelines and best practices. And as Cynthia said, that most likely will be published to the libguide in the future.
Hi, this is Lindsay. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. I just want to say that this is super awesome, and I was looking for a document like this when I started a badge program at my institution, I guess about 6 months ago. Specific comments I have are under the design of the badges. It's a lot to stick on one badge as far as having a relevant image and a relevant title and the awarding entity or institution, target audience, and date. That's all. It's just that it seems like a lot to put on one badge. And going forward, this is obviously a lot of work, but it'd be super cool if there was like a quick start guide for badges, or maybe a couple different guides depending on the level of technology or expertise for the person that wants to get it started. Like we're lucky at my institution that we have Moodle, and I'm able to integrate into Moodle, like right there in the LMS, but a lot of people don't have that option, or they don't have the ability to design a fancy looking badge and also get that started.
Thank you for those suggestions. Yeah, that quick start guide, I think, is something that a lot of libraries would need at this point. So thank you for that.
And I just wanted to, this is Emily, I wanted to address Marla's comment. And I forgot to say, too, that we are working with the Standards Committee, and Marla is going to be our representative that we're working with. Even though we're not, like I said, calling them standards, we're going to be working with them to get these kind of in a way that they're much more standardized, I guess, even if they're not standards. And she's suggesting that the Standards Committee can help us advertise with that. So that's excellent to know, and I also think the things Lindsay just mentioned were great ideas, so thank you for those ideas.
Yeah, and we can go back and review the recording of this meeting and all the suggestions that are coming through, not just through the chat, to make sure that we capture everyone's ideas, and we'll kind of, maybe we can compile some sort of, you know, kind of a list of to-do list to make sure that we're kind of getting everything, you know, on that list for us to follow up on. See, lots of folks are typing, so sorry for being quiet.
The other thing I'll mention while everybody is talking is one place we're thinking about going with these is eventually creating some kind of award for kind of like the best program that goes along with the guidelines that we ultimately create. So that's definitely not a done deal, but that's something that we're thinking about doing down the road, is creating like a best badge program in libraries award. So that's on the horizon, but we're not there yet. So just the idea to throw.
So Matthew, just to give you an example of kind of how we're handling it here at OSU, and I'm sure that Emily and Michael and other folks might, you know, have other suggestions as well. So we're creating, this is getting a little complicated, but we're creating different levels and different tracks. And so, for example, like a level 1 badge might be, you know, I attended a workshop and I took a little quiz after, kind of a thing. Level 2 might be, I attended a workshop and I had something, you know, something else to do. We're still figuring this out, so it's still kind of not a done deal yet. And then level 3 might be, I attended the workshop and I actually had to turn in sort of that artifact level quality work. And so that's kind of how we're trying to work through that issue. And then we're saying, you know, if you do X badges from this track and this level and X badges from that track and that level, it's feeding into what we're calling the bigger kind of a certificate level badge. We're working with our graduate college so that the graduate dean essentially awards that broader certificate. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do. But I really, really agree that, you know, badges for attendance is not really sort of optimal. So please, you know, Emily and Michael, if you have any other ideas, or anybody else, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, that's great. The way our program works at Delaware County Community College is students have to complete 3 workshops to earn a badge. Those workshops include some kind of assessment activity, whether it's a quiz or an assignment as part of the workshop. And that information is considered in the issuing of the badge. So I think really when you think about how you set up each individual badge, you need to note whether the badge is issued simply for attendance, or if the badge has been issued because they've completed some kind of assessment that's been evaluated, showing that they have competency and the skills represented in that badge. So I think really what it comes down to is being clear in the criteria for issuing of badges. That way anybody who's reviewing that content would be able to look at that badge metadata and say, okay, this badge was attendance, this badge was because they completed some kind of assignment.
This is Emily. I was just going to weigh in too. I absolutely agree with what Michael and Cynthia said. And generally speaking, in the badging community, there's a lot of sort of getting away from pure attendance badges. So, you know, you just show up for something that's offered in person to get a badge. A lot of people are sort of trying to get away from that just because they feel it kind of takes away from the rigor of badges, which is kind of where your question, I think, kind of comes in, Matthew. But doing something more to follow up, like Cynthia and Michael have mentioned, like having them do something extra after the workshop or something like that, even that is going to, I feel like, take it to another level. The way we've done it here at Penn State is we've created like a hierarchy of our badges. So we have 10 base level badges, and if you get, it's usually 3 within that family, you get the meta badge. And then if you get all 3 meta badges in our information literacy badge portfolio, then you get what's called Uber badge. And that's indicated in the design as well as in the names and things like that. So there are visual cues to show the person that it is more of a higher level badge. Definitely different ways you can go about it, but good question.
And I think this question really brings us into what Lauren has said in the discussion board, in the chat box, excuse me. She's talking about an interest in adopting badges at an institutional level and how to get buy-in. Specifically, I'm just looking at the question and kind of paraphrasing from faculty as well as within future employers. For us, buy-in from the faculty took about a year. They were happy that our students were attending workshops, and when we first started our workshop program, probably 4 or 5 years ago, we would issue a paper certificate if they completed a series of workshops. Faculty loved that, but there were some faculty members who wanted to know if which workshop they attended and when. And that's all they really were looking for. But when we were able to do some outreach with our faculty to really get them to understand what it means to have a badge for our students, and that's how we got faculty buy-in. Now, and so really we went through the process of showing them the criteria that was used to issue badges, taking them through some of the assessment activities, the quizzes, the assignments that happened in these workshops. And then faculty really understood that there was work involved in receiving the badge, and now they are now requiring that students say achieve a researcher badge or a citation badge as part of the class. For us, really, the keystone was getting the English faculty to buy in, because so much of our information literacy program dovetails what they do in our English program. So the English faculty have really bought into the process, and they now require students to get a researcher badge as well as a citations badge. And there's talk this year in the spring semester adding our research organization badge into the process. So students in our Comp 1 and 2 classes will be required to take a total of 6 to 9 workshops to achieve those 3 badges. So I think it's really just a matter of outreach among faculty and getting them involved and showing them the value of the badge.
Yeah, and here at Oklahoma State, we're taking a slightly different approach in the sense that a lot of our badges are for, right now we're starting with the graduate students because that's where we identified the biggest need. And a lot of the badges we're awarding are actually for workshops that are out of the classroom, but there are for skills that the graduate college as well as other folks on campus as well as employers have identified are really important that they're not necessarily getting in the classroom. Again, for example, like presentation and communication styles and delivery. So, and it's interesting because having the graduate college kind of sort of seal of approval has helped with the buy-in and has helped really kind of build up the momentum for this. And now other units on campus are interested in trying this out, and we're working with folks like the career center and some of the writing center as well, and they're offering workshops under this broader umbrella as well. So it's really helped kind of create that broader kind of rigor and saying, no, you can't just show for something and get a badge. That's not really what this is about. You actually do have to demonstrate that the learning has occurred. So it's interesting, and you know, the out-of-classroom stuff is really the most challenging because there isn't that kind of other entity. There isn't a faculty or a course that says, yes, you know, the certification has value. And so we've sort of managed to create the value by aligning ourselves with the graduate college. So that's what's worked here at OSU.
Yeah, that's excellent, Cynthia. And I like to add that our program is all our workshops are outside the curriculum for the individual classes. It's just that over time the faculty buy-in has been such that they've seen the value and now they've added the workshops to their class. So it really worked well for us at a community college in terms of what our students needed to receive from the information literacy program.
And that's great, and hopefully we'll get there. We'll get there as well. And so we started with that smaller population because of that. Yeah, but that's wonderful. So we'll see what happens. I see there's lots of discussion going on chat, so I'm going to catch up.
I'll just chime in from my experience here at Penn State with faculty buy-in. It's taken, I think it was Cynthia said or maybe it was Michael, about a year to really get faculty buy-in. And just now I'm starting to get sort of the rewards of that. Over the summer I had a speech instructor take me up on trying a badge in her class. And she had them complete the badge for some extra points. Most of the class did it, and I had some really great feedback from the instructor that she really noticed a difference in the sources students were using in their speeches after they completed the badge, which was about evaluating credibility on the web. And it was even mentioned in some of her evaluations afterwards that they really enjoyed it. They really learned a lot from it. So she's decided this fall semester, that she's going to have them do 5 badges. So she really is going all out with them. So that's some great feedback. The other thing we've done here as a university, not just the library, but we've met with our career services about how we can get things sort of jump-started a little bit more. And they've actually invited us to their fall meeting with employers that come to the career fair to, potentially hire Penn State students, and talk to this advisory board that's made up of about 30 different employers about badges, to kind of get their feedback and see how we can get them to adopt them and things like that. So those are 2 ways that we've had a little some inroads with badges here at Penn State. So I thought I'd just share since we were talking.
And that makes me think that too, maybe for the libguide or whatever kind of document where these guidelines reside, we can also have sort of strategies for how to work with your campus or employers or whoever else, your partners, to get that kind of stuff, happening, because I think folks kind of, would find hopefully that useful, not just kind of how do you create the program itself, but how then do you kind of help sell it on campus and in other venues. So maybe that's something else we can do, that we can solicit feedback from interested folks to contribute to that kind of documentation.
And thank you, Matthew, for that suggestion. I think you're correct. We should add that to our guidelines document. How to get buy-in at the campus and faculty level, and a discussion about rigor.
This is Emily. I just dropped a link in the chat as well to the connected credentials that Lumina has been working on, and this is some of what I was talking about before about the summit, but they've created a framework that they're trying to work on that would be sort of open and applicable to everybody in higher ed. It's like a framework that everybody could work within to create badges that would then be more standardized and transferable between institutions. So I think this is what you were getting at with saying about could there be AAC and U level rubrics tied to badging at the higher ed level. So that might help give you some answers if you take a look at their framework in the link that I sent. That's the closest thing I've seen to something like that. And I just saw Lindsay's comment about the badges living inside their LMS and all students having their students at that, I'm not sure what it's that institution you're at, but having them all in the badge. I think that's great. We don't have that ability to scale it quite that much at Penn State because we're so large, but I think that would be a great base level to know students have all had that experience of earning, your badge. Well, you are big. Okay, so I'd be really interested to hear follow up on how that went and how you're able to divide that sort of workload up and how it all works, because that's really great. It's really interesting too to me that it's like a course that you have them enrolled in, and that you have them in your LMS, because we're not able to tie them in with our LMS quite yet, but we hope to do that in the future here. So that's great to know that you guys are doing it, and I'll definitely be looking to see how that goes for you guys.
This is a really great conversation. And I just want to bring it back. Now, when we think about the guidelines, do you think they provide enough detail for those who are new to badges, or and those new to developing a program, or do you think we need to go into more detail with our guidelines here?
Yeah, I agree with you, Kelsey. That could almost be its own document, and it's always kind of shifting around as well as far as the sort of technical requirements. But I'm sure we could come up with something to start with. Maybe, we mentioned having a quick start guide. That could be a section that helps people just, I've had a lot of questions over the years about, like, where do I just go to get started? I need a free site that will just help me get in there and kind of figure out how this whole badging things works. And people that aren't aware of sites like Credly or something like that could just be useful for a jumping off place if we don't want to get too into the weeds with technical issues. So I think that could be definitely a good idea, something that we could work on. And yeah, it's a good suggestion.
Hi, this is Lindsay again. I've got a couple more thoughts since you're asking for more details on what we think. I like that in the introduction you include a lot about these being valuable to employers, and I would suggest maybe putting more emphasis on how important it is that the badge or the micro-credential be a really meaningful indication of some sort of achievement. And to go along with that, I would encourage you to maybe expand a little bit on aligning these with learning objectives, maybe encourage writing really solid measurable learning objectives, and maybe suggesting some pedagogical models like competency-based education, or maybe give an example of how important it is to have students actually do something to earn that badge, just to add that meaning for the employers later on.
Thank you, Lindsay. Those are great thoughts. It's something that we'll bring back to the group.
Something I'll just put out there while people are typing is if you're interested in working on any of these sort of sections of the libguide that we've discussed today, if there's anything that particularly jumps out at you as being of interest or that you can contribute to or would like to contribute to, please get in touch with one of us. We'd be happy to include you in some kind of project like that.
That's great. Thanks, Emily. And that was perfect timing because I just moved the slide forward to our contact information. So there you have our email addresses. And yeah, I think what we could do is then maybe just we'll kind of look back at the chat, listen to the recording, and see what are the kind of specific action items we identified, and then kind of figure out who is interested in working further on them and kind of go from there. Great. Oh, thanks, Lorene. Yay. That's great.